Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a sustainable and profitable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today I'll be interviewing Claire Taylor. Now, as many of you know, I enjoy interviewing fellow Nuffield scholars from around the world, and today is no different. Claire Taylor is a scholar originally from the UK, but now living in Australia. I had the opportunity to meet Claire through the Nuffield network, and some of the stuff that she was working on I thought would make really interesting story for the podcast here today. Now, Claire is a founder of a consulting business focusing on advocacy in agriculture. She also is one of the founding board members for a new organization called Unstoppable World. Now, Claire and a small group of very passionate people in agriculture and resiliency from around the world had started this organization, and I thought it'd be really interesting to highlight a lot of what they're doing today, along with some of the experience and things that Claire learned along her Nuffield journey. Now, Claire's Nuffield topic was really focused on building more collaborative and positive global dialogues around the world in food and agriculture. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to move into some of the other things that she learned on her travels about resiliency in agriculture and mental health. Now, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this interview as much as I did. So with that, let's get going to the interview with Claire Taylor. Claire Taylor, welcome to the AgCulture Podcast. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And you're coming from New South Wales, Australia, right?
I am. I'm coming from a very cold winter as we're recording this just now. As I look to the Northern Hemisphere and see lots of sunshine, I'm very jealous.
Yep. I'm sure you guys don't get as cold as we do in Michigan, but no. I do understand your concern with winter. But so you were our fellow Nuffield scholar, 1 year before me, a 2023 Nuffield scholar. And of course, like with any Nuffield scholar, most of the people in my audience know about Nuffield scholars now, and they know that usually it's one of those big trajectory or change points in people's lives that go through the program. And you've done a lot of that in the last year. So before we get into that, I'm really interested to hear your story on that. We're going to talk about resiliency. We're going to talk about a new organization being started that you're a part of that's really intriguing to me. And we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things in this episode. But let's start out first with your background. How did you get involved in agriculture?
So I come from a small beef farm in the southwest coast of Scotland. So I'm not from Australia, you might tell by my accent. But I grew up in a farm. My mum's a vet. We also run a kennels and cattery business. But I originally wasn't really destined to work in agriculture. I studied politics. I ended up doing journalism. I worked at the BBC. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I actually delved into agriculture because we had a thing called Brexit, the EU. We left the EU, and at the time it was massively affecting agriculture in the United Kingdom and where our future was headed and the uncertainty in farming. And I decided to leave the BBC, leave a very comfortable, cushy job, and I started as a junior farming reporter, knowing very little. I thought I knew a lot about agriculture, and my goodness, every day was just like, wow, in terms of the knowledge I was picking up. And I worked in farming journalism for a number of years, particularly in politics. So that's kind of was in my mid-20s. I was working in that. And then over the years, I kind of delved into a bit of TV commentating, and I wrote some broadsheet columns, both in farming and to non-farming audiences. And then it was in the sort of last 3 years, I decided to do a Nuffield farming scholarship. And I'd been hearing from farmers that they were under increasing pressure and scrutiny, and conversations which were once about profitability and efficiency, where suddenly it was about sustainability, it was about the environment, it was about their greenhouse gas emissions, and everyone kept saying there's an anti-farming agenda happening. And I was being told this everywhere I went, and And I decided to travel outside of Scotland and to think, is this what all farmers are feeling around the world? And that sparked my Nuffield Farming Scholarship. And I chose a very journalist tagline. It was turning the tide on the anti-farming agenda. And I set out to embark on, is this happening and how are farmers responding to scrutiny? Which sort of brings me into, did my Nuffield Scholarship, and we can talk a bit about what I did next. Probably said enough for now, Paul.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Growing up in Scotland, not necessarily day to day involved in agriculture, and then and then you end up in Australia.
That wasn't a mistake. I shouldn't say that, but it wasn't intended. In the last sort of couple of months of my travels, I met my partner, Mitch, who's a farmer here in the New South Wales and Orange, as you were saying, and met him on day 3 of Australia, and I haven't been able to shake him off since. And he convinced me to move to Australia. So yeah, at the start of the year, end of December 24, I uprooted from Scotland and moved my whole life over here to Australia, still massively transitioning and adjusting, but it's been another part of many years of change.
Yeah, and now you are on farm every day.
We're on farm. We've got a farm lease now, which when we got here, my partner was leasing lots of land around here with his Angus cattle, and now we've just moved on to the farm. We've got a beautiful homestead, and it's just great to move back onto farm after so many years of traveling, which is great. So we're able to be here, but I can also run my business. He's got his own farm management business, so we're just constantly busy doing lots of things, but it's great to be back in farming.
Yeah, and a beautiful area of the world as well. I enjoyed going through there. So you spent all this time traveling, seeing other cultures around the world, visiting unique places in agriculture, being now living in a very different environment from what you grew up in. What are some of the really big standout differences that you've seen as you've traveled around between being in Scotland, being in Australia, and some of the other places that you visited over the last couple of years?
I think a really obvious one was around water scarcity. And I think coming from the UK, it wasn't really top of our agenda because if anything, we complain about the rain. And I was suddenly in parts of Australia, in parts of Africa, where conversations were all around water. And that was a big shock. And in terms of where it sort of sat in the policy agenda. Another big thing was food security. I think in parts of Europe, we're so focused now around questions around, I guess, our climate impact, and with good reason as well. But we often don't look at actually the production side, the food security side. And it was when I traveled in parts of Asia and Africa, it just really hit me how privileged we've become in our conversations around agriculture. When I went into communities where food security and human security were much higher up the agenda. And I think when you're in your own bubble, you don't see it because that becomes your world on your doorstep. So when you travel and you realise everyone's facing very different situations, I think food security really stuck out for me as a big one.
How did you deal with that in your mind when you're going around and talking to people, policymakers in Europe and the UK and Australia, where they do have the luxury of not having to talk about food security, at least at this point?
It's an interesting one because I'm very fortunate now, Paul, that I do a lot of keynote speaking and I get to speak in front of big audiences in lots of different countries and share a bit about my travels and share some of these perspectives, for example, around food security. And I always tell them a story that when I got to Zimbabwe, I met a good friend of mine, a now very good friend of mine, and I was asking him questions about his business around, efficiency and why wasn't he automating and why wasn't he done. I was picking out all these things and asking questions about climate impact. And he just stopped me and he said, Claire, you're asking the wrong questions. You should be asking me about how I'm supporting people. And he was like, I've got a duty to employ people, not to automate everything because we have a government that doesn't support in terms of public services. And it was a real profound moment for me that sometimes we do ask the wrong questions because we're no longer listening or observing. And when I talk to people in Australia and the UK and different places, I always do a bit of a perspective check because I've had my perspective pulled into check. And that moment for me was just so profound. So now I probably am a bit more cynical. And when I go into rooms, and I see it now because I've been in those places where I was challenged everywhere I went. So I sort of think, okay, maybe we do sometimes need to see the bigger picture and who's dominating the decisions globally. Often it is Europe, whether it's around like deforestation regulation, things like that. It's not actually realizing some of the bigger pieces of the puzzle that are happening around the world.
What would be some advice that you'd give to somebody like you or myself that would be talking to these policymakers? Because they're not the ones going down to Zimbabwe and seeing this firsthand on a farm in Zimbabwe, or down in, the Amazonian region of Brazil and seeing how people are cattle farming. How do you talk to them about this to really get that picture ingrained into them?
Well, I think it's often about sharing examples and stories and encouraging people to, I guess, look outside their doorstep. Like I was saying, I think it's quite important. But it's also around collaboration. I think agriculture is quite siloed. In general, we only speak to certain communities or certain sectors, where actually there's so many opportunities on the global stage to be engaging and listening and understanding what's happening, whether that's attending conferences or whether that's just stepping outside our usual, I guess, information feeds and seeing what's happening in different places and not always believing everything we see in the media. And as someone that's worked in the media, I'm very critical of it, because in general, we're in a world where it's clickbait headlines and we're competing for space. And often you're only reading the headlines that already confirm your own bias or confirm what you think. So I think it's sometimes important to be saying to people, we've got to actually have a bit of widen those circles of influence to be able to see things. But I always say I'm a communicator. So yeah, everyone thinks what I do is I speak for a living. But one of the big learnings I had was about listening. And if you don't listen, often I think it's probably one of the things we're missing most, is actually taking time to stop and to listen, even if those conversations are uncomfortable. And I think sometimes it's really good to be challenged, like I was in Zimbabwe, or to be challenged in agriculture, because when we're challenged, we're more likely to improve, or to be able to really, I guess, reflect on what we've been doing, where there's been problems and how we can improve. So yeah, I always think listening is really good.
I know this might be a little bit of a cliche question, but what is listening? What's truly listening mean?
I think truly listening is about being present and fully giving your attention to the person who you're in that conversation with, and taking the time to really take in what they're saying in a meaningful way, and to it's not always about giving feedback or responding, but it's really just sitting on that piece of information and understanding it. Because I think sometimes we can be shallow listeners and we can take in what we need to, what helps us, but we don't actually think about, the wider message that they're saying. So I think it is, God, that probably sounds a bit Delali the way I'm saying it, but it's, just really being present and listening to the full story that's happening, and being really mindful of that.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because, like you said, there's a lot of shallow listening, but I think that's one thing Nuffield's really taught me, is how to truly listen to somebody what they're saying. And that example that you gave from Zimbabwe is a perfect example of that. So along with most other scholars that I've met, and including myself, you have your topic that you're doing, that you're studying, and then you have the 5 or 6 other topics that you also wish you were studying as you go around, and you want to learn more about a lot of different things as you're traveling. So what were some of those subtopics that you were really looking at as you were traveling around?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I became really interested in the role of women in agriculture, and I guess it's always something that I integrate into conversations, but it wasn't maybe its own path for me. And again, when I was in Africa, probably I was stopped on multiple occasions when they said, "What are you studying? What are you here for?" And they said, to really understand what's happening in Africa, you need to understand where women sit within the economy. And it was really interesting having conversations around like transforming, I guess, the economic opportunities for women, like access to farms and markets, which was very different to men. And I guess in different countries I went to, I became so aware that there wasn't the same, what we consider equality or gender issues in the UK are completely different to when you're in parts of Asia, Africa, South America. And I just became very aware of where women fit within agriculture, but they're also where they fit in terms of their role within farming too. And that was really interesting. And then that filtered into, I guess, a lot about leadership and around, I guess, board makeup. And one of the big things that I found really interesting was around leadership, and it was about who's representing our sector. And the diversity question is always something that, again, I kind of spiraled into too, because a lot of my work, Paul, is not in farming, because I'm really interested in how we connect to non-farmers. And I suddenly started looking at the fact that a lot of our leaders in agriculture, a lot of people representing boards or the storytelling, don't actually represent wider society demographics, and whether that's around thought or gender or race. And it made me really think about how those connections, how we connect our messages to a demographic we're coming further distance from. So I thought that was around leadership, around gender. There's so many things. And then around resilience, I think everywhere I went, when I talked about farming under pressure, a lot of it was around the fact that so many farmers are struggling with mental health. And it wasn't just farmers, it was everybody involved in agriculture, the pressures that were rising, and costs, and just so many things that were people's control. And there's so many organizations and movements and I guess discussions that I was coming across as well. So that was another turn that just kept coming up. And as you know, Paul, from doing it yourself, we were just saying you had about 6 different topics. I mean, you start off with this idea of what you're going to do, and then you listen to people and you hear what's happening and you go, my gosh, that would be an interesting topic to pursue. So it is very hard to actually come back and just stick to one thing.
But all those things that you learned shape you, and you might not write your main report on it, right? But you're definitely going to take that into the future with you. And I think that's one of the things that you're working on in your transition here now. One of the organizations that you've become a part of and have helped to shape and transform as it's being born here. And that's something that I really wanted to talk about with you, the organization of Unstoppable.
Yeah.
And that is just about to launch, right?
Yeah, we have just launched, but we're literally a few weeks into launching.
So let's go there a little bit deeper. What is Unstoppable? What was kind of the thought process behind getting it going, and where do you hope to take it in the future?
So exciting. Unstoppable it's a global leadership and mental health initiative that the way it works is that we are putting together immersive tours in really profound locations around the world. So likes of Zimbabwe and South Africa and others being added in. And as part of those tours, there's also resilience toolkits and learning along the way. So it's about giving people opportunities to, I guess, step outside the boardroom and into, we're calling it real world classrooms, and to develop amazing tools along the way. And part of the reason, but there's so many different things around it, and we're so passionate, the whole team working on it. But there are a lot of amazing movements working in the mental health resilience space. But when it comes to actual practical testing things out in the real world, that's where sometimes it can come short. And the vision behind it was to actually give people those moments out where they can step outside of their farms or their businesses and their comfort zones and go into an environment where they can actually practically implement different things. So we've chosen locations where there has been really inspiring stories and also hardships around agriculture, and in those really profound settings to be able to bring in like leadership modules and mental resilience modules, and really around personal growth and brand. There's a whole exercise within that to really develop people's both professional and their personal journey. So we're very excited about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of looking at education and getting out of the farm, but very, very interesting model. And I found it very fascinating when I first got the opportunity to hear about it. And I think it's going to do very well. So what type of people are you hoping to get on this journey?
So initially, we have really, I guess, launched it as around agriculture. So we are looking for people working within agriculture. That can be farmers on the ground. It can be people across the supply chain, businesses, corporates. We've tried to keep the prices really, really affordable and accessible, so we can really make it something everyone can have an opportunity to be part of. But really, it's about, I guess, everybody is feeling pressure, and it's about trying to open it up to individuals who can, I guess, preemptively get ahead of some of those problems. And that's where the kind of resilience comes into it, and making sure we're attracting individuals before crisis hits. Because often, I think within agriculture, a lot of the help comes in once there's been a problem. And if we called it a mental health exercise, I don't think people would engage with it. I think people are nervous still. There's still too much. There's still those kind of stereotypes attached to it. Whereas it's not that. This is a much bigger personal and professional development journey. And as part of that, there's the resilience element. And we do have we've got wonderful people that we've partnered around the world. We've got mental health practitioners who are providing mentorship and guidance. But we've also got leadership coaches, and we've got people, brand coaches, and different individuals. So we're trying to attract people who are really looking at that holistic development, not just people who are there around the resilience. And what we'd really thought about, Paul, is there's a bit of a conference fatigue happening globally. We all go to conferences, or we all go to courses, CPD, and we learn in a room and four walls around us. And I mean, I'm the queen of conferences. I go to so many, and I see amazing speakers, but they all kind of blur into one. And I think the difference between what this is trying to do is if you're out at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, or the Alan Savory Institute, or you're swimming with penguins in South Africa, those moments and associations will make learning stick. And that's what we want to do, because when you hear something that's life-changing and it's in a setting, you're never going to forget it. And we want to create that sort of generational impact. So it has more of a legacy. Because I think so many programs, you've been part of them, I've been part of them, they can be really powerful and transformative, but they don't really have a legacy. And we built the whole program. So there's an alumni network, so everyone is connected, a bit like the Nuffield program, but there's also continued support afterwards, because if you suddenly take 15 individuals into a life-changing experience, it can be quite hard adjusting afterwards. So we've actually engaged with people and mentors who are going to be doing follow-up calls, and how are you going to put some of these learnings into action and decision making. So there's a lot more to it than just what happens within those 12 days of immersion. So yeah, we're trying to build something that's going to have real legs for the future.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the critical part that you're looking at for the experience side is what I experienced during my Nuffield journey is the most impactful events were something that, like, one of them comes to mind. I was in Brazil. We were, as a group, swimming in waterfalls out in the middle of this 2-track road down in the middle of nowhere in Brazil together as a group, and jumping off waterfalls and just sitting in a beautiful spot. And I can remember every person that was there. I can remember their names. I can remember our conversations, what we were talking about, and having those conversations along with that memory just ingrains that in you for a really long time, and it really makes that stick. So I love that form of educating and encouragement and connection with people. I think that's very, very important. That you don't see much of around the world.
That's the thing, because we had to think of something that is different, because there's so many things out there now, and there's so much noise, and there's a lot of silos. And I think for us, it was about actually collaborating mental health initiatives and leadership initiatives, and making sure this was truly global, that we had partners around the world building something, because it's bigger than, so we've got a board of 4 of us, but it's got to be bigger than the 4 of us. It's got to be this huge, big global network that's growing constantly and adapting, because the learnings around leadership and mental health, they're changing. So we're changing the course and adapting, and it's amazing. Ever since we launched, people have been coming forward and saying, we love what you're doing. Can we support with a module? And then, so it's really special. But what I didn't say earlier is one of the really important things to us is that the actual tours, so I've mentioned there about Zimbabwe and South Africa, but they're actually created by locals. And that's really important to us as well, because our board is Canada and the UK, Australia, and parts of Africa. But when it comes to actually deciding in those itineraries, those activities, it's got to be locally led. It's because a lot of them are going out into communities, and it's really understanding the culture in that location. And we can't do that side of things. So we want that to be really authentic and grounded in that. But then the actual the course content is going to have this global picture too. So it's a really sort of interesting initiative. And something that we're really excited about as well, Paul, is that we've done a diversity pledge as part of it. So every single tour that goes out has $5,000 that they decide as a group to spend in a rural community. And every tour goes out into community projects where they're seeing, I guess, really challenging things and resilience in action. And then they get the opportunity to decide where that money is spent. And that's part of the decision making and the leadership side of it is too. But it also builds a legacy. And you're talking about, you remembered Brazil and the waterfalls. Like, nobody's going to forget that moment where they've seen what they've seen, but they've also actively been able to invest and support and engage in something like that, because that makes that more profound and impactful. So we're trying to, throughout the tour, build those connections between different parts of society and communities and create a bit more of an impact. So yeah, we're very excited.
No, that's great. A lot of different aspects all coming together in one organization. It's very interesting.
I know we start our tours kick off next year. It seems so exciting. It doesn't seem that far away when we think about it. We've got South Africa in February and Zimbabwe in April. And it's, at the moment, we've got tours in these two locations, but we're already in plans. Every time we talk about it, someone's coming forward and saying, could we do this in New Zealand or India? And that's what's exciting and we've got Uganda and Rwanda. They're in the mix too. So it's quite exciting that we can begin to build this out. So it might start as the iconic side of it in Zimbabwe and South Africa, but we want to build it out and be able to offer opportunities globally, people to travel. So.
And you said there'd be groups of roughly 15 people for 12 days at a time?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. And as part of that, shall I give you an example of a typical day? So
yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what that looks like.
It's quite a packed schedule, but it's so teams are arriving, and what we don't know is some people might send a whole team from an organization. Some will be meeting for the first time. So depending on the makeup of that, there are local tour guides who are going to be taking this team through this sort of 12-day learning journey. And it can be anything from in the morning arriving at Victoria Falls and having a tour and being out in nature, and then incorporating those different modules within that as the course unfolds. So every day has something really profound, whether it's an interaction at a national park or conservation, or it's going to a regenerative farming site, and like, for example, the Allen Savory Institute. But then it's also then taking the time to integrate those learnings as part of the day. So, and it's not just doing things around farming. So we've got people doing one of the things in Zimbabwe will be about a silver workshop for jewelry. So there's different things to try and take people outside their usual, I guess, comfort zone and just doing things a little bit differently. But and then there's a mix of culture and going into the cities as well, and just, yeah, it's a very holistic thing that we're trying to put together. So people come away and it's not just a tour where they're going on safaris, but they're actually going out into community projects and regenerative farms and learning about sustainability in different ways. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that piece with communicating and interacting with the local community is really, really key to understanding community or understanding a society when you're visiting a different country. And that's what separates you from being a tourist, right? If you don't connect with the local community, you're just a tourist in my mind.
You are, and I remember, Paul, one of my like I'll never forget moments when I was when traveling through Zimbabwe was the fact that I did not go as a tourist, and because everyone kept thinking I was just going to go to all these big safaris and hang out with tourists, but I was going off the beaten track and having moments and going out onto farms and meeting locals and going onto schools, and I would never have had that opportunity if I had just gone. And you can spend a lot of money and you can see elephants and do wonderful things, but actually you learn so much more when you actually speak to people who've been living and working in places for so many years, and it's just really culturally enriching as well. And those are the points where you actually, like you say, you remember, and you when you come back you forget, because when I look back at my Nuffield, and I did 16 countries in the space of a year and a half. It's a lot of places to go, but the places that I remember the most are all places which were so new to me, like coming from the UK and going through parts of Indonesia and parts of South America, it just blew my mind because of the differences and being really immersed in those cultures. And so I remember those experiences way more than I do my ones across Europe or New Zealand and Australia, even though like there were so many elements that were easier. There wasn't always the language issues, and it was easier to structure and plan things. It's those other areas that I remember.
Well, at least Australia would have worked out well for you in the end, right?
Yeah, it did. Absolutely. It's a bit warmer than Scotland as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. As you've been working in conjunction with the three other board members to put this together and all the other people that have helped you along the way, what were some of the big challenges that came about starting an organization like this, or learnings that you had from it?
I think in the early days, putting something like this together, you are trying to find so many individuals and partners when you're right at the early stages of people wanting to take you seriously and understand the impact. Why is this different? What is this new? How expensive is this going to be? All these different factors in anything are quite challenging. But once you begin to bring in a few individuals who believe in the vision, that makes the difference completely. So we were lucky, to be honest, that we had a great network between all of us. We had amazing people we could draw on for skills. So we had that foundation to really lift it right from the start. But you're nervous like anything, because when you put something out there, are people going to be interested? Are people going to book it? Are people? It's a risk that you've got to take when you're putting something and all your ideas and passion is going out. So I think that's been the challenge for us. Is we've known the concept is amazing. We know it's going to be transformative for people. But we always need to make sure we get the first people coming in and seeing the tour in action and capturing it in the videos and the moments and the testimonials for people to say, wow, this is a real thing and this is what it can do. So I think it's like anybody starting out in a new business, until you get the first client or the first memory that you can build on and showcase what this is, it's really hard to really build on it. But because the reason it's not been too challenging is because we're also passionate. And there's been no doubt. We have had no doubters. And everybody we've went to, whether it's around legal advice, financial advice, the advice around our courses, everybody has supported us. And that's been the biggest highlight for all of us, is that not one person has pulled apart this concept. They've challenged parts of it, they've tweaked it, we've adapted, and we've been very open to that. But everybody has said this is going to be powerful. So we never lost motivation, which kept it, was an amazing thing to have.
Yeah. One, I think that goes to show the power of your network and probably the quality of your network is they weren't trying to put you down. They're trying to figure out how to build this up and make it even better. And that's just a very critical thing that I've learned, especially through the last couple of years of having a great network of people around you is the most valuable thing, your best asset that you could ever have.
And just you, Paul, listening to me talking about Unstoppable, like, do you think it's something that who do you think would be the first people that would be interested? Like, who can you see really enjoying and being part of it and getting a lot out of something like this?
I was actually just thinking as you were talking through my head, man, I wish you had like a teenage version of this for my kids when they're like 17, 18 years old, because that's such a critical point where those things stick in your mind even more. And to have that grounding at that stage of life when you're just getting launched out into the real world, I think that would be phenomenal for them. But obviously that's not your core focus here right now. But that for anyone in that stage, or anyone that's really looking at, you're probably a lot like me looking at, okay, I'm going to probably pivot in my career over the next couple of years. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people do Nuffield, as they're looking for that pivot point. And anyone that's in that situation, maybe they don't want to commit to doing, 2 year commitment like Nuffield is, but this would be a great commitment where they could have that ongoing network after they complete it as well. But just to get outside of their day-to-day lives, as you were saying, anyone that's looking at making a critical change in their life, to have that type of experience at that time really resets your mind and helps you focus on what truly is important and what do you value in life, not financially, but what do you really value? What's your life going to be about? How are you going to provide value to others? How are you going to make an impact in this world? And that's where I see. I don't know how you find that target market, but those are the people in my mind that you would really want to focus on getting on an opportunity like this, because that's going to be very impactful for them at that critical point in their lives.
I think that's a really lovely way of putting it. And I think your point around not everyone has 2 years to, change their job or to travel, but to be able to condense that into a shorter period, it's really powerful as part of that. And I guess that's where we've also brought in the mentors and some of the learnings from it is once they get home, if they've suddenly had this wow moment, like how do they then put that into action, which is why there's follow-ups and there's counseling support, but there's also business support. So they can actually say, okay, this is the next step. And that's all included in it. But your thing around teenagers, I've had so many people get in touch with me from particularly around young farmers and around like colleges, ag colleges. And that is something that we are really keen to do. So I do think there's an opportunity there for, and you are right, it's at a critical point in their life. And some people might be wanting to do a gap year or thinking about saving up for something like that. Or maybe they're moving to college and doing that transition from school. I do think there's definitely an interest I'm already seeing. There's 3 or 4 different places in all different countries that have got in touch and said, would you do this for students? And I think, and we absolutely can do it as part of that. And every tour is unique too. Every tour is customized for the individual. So we've got different courses on every tour and it adapts and changes the whole time. So we do tier it to the individuals that are coming as part of that, which is good. And I also know we do personality sort of, I don't know if the word's profiling or what you call it, but there's a bit of a sort of, I guess, a personal reflection journey as part of that, which I did when I did my Nuffield. And it was quite interesting seeing, I guess, my personality type compared to some of my peers and where we fit around decision making. And sometimes it's really useful to understand what your strengths are and your weaknesses, so you can really incorporate that. So that's something. It's always a bit of an interesting one for people when they find that out.
Yeah, that's especially as we were getting together in our global focus groups. It was interesting to see. Okay, now you know who's probably going to act like this, or who's going to be best with the financial aspect, or who's going to be the one that's going to keep us moving along to the next stop.
Yeah, I think I laughed because I did mine and mine came back as people, which I kind of knew it was going to come back as, but I was like, right, so she's not technical. She's probably not very good on the financial side. Whereas I had like my colleagues of mine that were minutiae, detail, focus orientated. And I was just like, I was more about people. And it was quite interesting, but it just, yeah. And I think it's sometimes important to understand that, for you to be able to understand others and their roles and where they fit in. And that's where leadership comes into it too. There's so many different types of leaders out there, but understanding who you are and how you are as a leader can help you better lead other people. So it's, yeah.
and it makes you appreciate them. Like if you're not the type of person that can, really handle a lot of details, well, you're really glad somebody in the group handled the details to know the address of the next place you're going and what time you need to be there. Like,
yeah, exactly.
you appreciate that about them. They might not be the person that's talking to the host the whole time, but yeah, each one has its own strengths. So, and you can appreciate that more. Well, good. Well, Claire, I really appreciate you coming on today, talking about your journey over the last couple of years, and also the new venture of Unstoppable. Really looking forward to seeing how this launches and hearing more about it and all of the people that you guys impact through it.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. It was just great to speak to you, and it's always great to connect with a fellow Nuffield scholar and across the world. So
where can listeners find out more about Unstoppable, or if they want to get involved or just find out more detail, where's the best place to send them?
So they can head to our website, the Unstoppable World website, and we've now got it on LinkedIn as well, Paul. But okay. And we have an email and things, but that'll all be on the website. But I know you will want to make it to salesy and pitchy and things like that too, but that would be amazing. And the website's great because it's got all the itineraries on there. Thanks,
Claire, for being here again. Really appreciate it. And again, look forward to seeing how Unstoppable goes and all the lives that you're going to affect and transform through it.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. And yeah, just such a privilege to be able to share about the journey that we've been building. And yeah, looking forward to seeing where this goes. And it's so lovely to meet you and be part of your podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast. As always, if you would like to reach out to Claire, we'll have some links to what she's working on and her personal LinkedIn on our show notes. And I encourage you to check out Unstoppable World. I'm really excited to see where the organization goes, and I think there's some great people that are going to be leading it, and I'm sure they'll have a major impact around the world through this organization. And as always, if you would be so kind as to take a few seconds and share this episode or any of our episodes with somebody you know, we really appreciate that. That's how we grow our audience. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to be back out on the road traveling around, this time the U.S. I'll be driving from Michigan all the way to the Pacific, spending most of the time in this Pacific Northwest, hitting up some farms and agribusinesses in that area of the world. So check out my personal LinkedIn, Paul Windemuller, my LinkedIn there. You will see some pictures and some posts that I'll be doing along that journey if you want to check that out. And we'll probably have a few podcast episodes, I'm hoping, along the way that we'll be able to record while on the road as well. So with that, until next week, I'm Paul Windemuller, and thank you once again for listening to the AgCulture Podcast.